When I started Iron Throwdown, there was one character who I was confident I would never bring into this series. Arthur Dayne. The way characters talk about him and revere him as a knight made me think no matter who I picked to be his opponent, everyone would know that by the end of the day, Arthur is more likely to come out on top.
Sir Arthur Dayne.
The sword of the morning.
Father said he was the best swordsman he ever saw.
Even the likes of Baratheon, Selmy, and Jaime Lannister, who are also considered to be one of the greatest in the world, fall short. Mostly because of that fucking sword Dawn. Yet eventually, someone did come to my mind who was a really good chance of coming out on top, more often than not. You all know who it is because you read the title, so I won't waste any more of your time. Let's get into it. Hello one and all, Jasper here, and today the two fighters who will be stepping into the arena of Meereen are some of the greatest the world of Ice and Fire has ever seen. Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, considered to be one of the greatest knights in the history of Westeros, with none who can match his skill and prowess, will be facing against a young Robert Baratheon, the Demon of the Trident. So let's not waste any time and start going over what these fighters bring to the table. Starting with Arthur Dayne, the way we hear people speak of him, he seems to be more of a legend rather than an actual man. Yet, with characters who not only knew him firsthand but also fought against him, yet still praise him, it seems that most if not all we hear about the Sword of the Morning is based more on fact than fiction. Starting with his arms and armor, Arthur, like any proper knight, would likely be wearing plate armor, as many official and fan art depict him wearing such. Though nobody sings songs about how great Arthur's armor was, they sing songs about his sword, Dawn, the ancestral sword of House Dayne, and unlike other blades, it is not passed down to the head of House Dayne, but instead given to the greatest knight of the family, and of all the ones who have wielded it, Arthur is considered the greatest of them. Forged from a fallen star, it has the same qualities as Valyrian steel, lighter and stronger than actual steel, and able to hold an edge for far longer. Dawn is a great sword that anyone would be lucky to gaze upon, let alone actually wield it. And this was the only weapon that he ever used, so I don't want to hear anyone talking about how he dual-wields swords. Get that show bullshit out of my face! Let's face it though, it doesn't matter how great your sword is when your skill is found lacking. Luckily for us, Arthur has plenty to spare. Being named to the King's Guard when such a title truly meant something, and standing beside some of the greatest knights of the time such as Baratheon, Selmy, and Jaime Lannister, and still being considered their superior by not only the populace, but by those two themselves. Jaime has stated that Arthur could slay the likes of Loras Tyrell, Osmond Kettleback, Balon Swan, Meryn Trent, and Boris Blunt at the same time with his left hand while taking a piss with his right. Obviously, a bit of an exaggeration, but for Jaime to speak so highly of you, then you really do have to be the real deal. The only knight who would be his equal is Barristan Selmy, another legend, though he is still alive in the books. However, even he would likely fail to beat the Sword of the Morning, as George R.R. Martin stated in an interview that so long as Dayne has Dawn, then even Barristan would fall. All of this is just hearsay. We haven't even gone into events that actually took place. Arthur has claimed victory at plenty of tourneys, such as Viserys' birth celebration, bested the Smiling Knight, who Jaime describes as being his generation's Gregor Clegane, and his most famous battle would be his only defeat, as he and his fellow Kingsguard members, Sir Oswell Went and Lord Commander Gerald Hightower, faced against Eddard Stark, along with his 6 companions, each one being a part of the nobility, and likely a skilled fighter in their own right. We do not know the details of the fight, but by the end of it, only Eddard Stark and Howland Reed were still alive. Still, losing when you are outnumbered by trained and skilled warriors, there is no dishonor in that. It's clear to me that Arthur Dayne more than urges the legend he has become, but can he stand up to the charging stag? Robert Baratheon, the future king of Westeros and by far one of the strongest men to ever live, and throughout history only 2 might be able to boast of being stronger. Gregor Clegane, the mountain that rides, and Maelys Blackfire, a man people said could rip someone's head off with his bare hands and kill a horse with a single punch. Yet, even if they are strong, both of these two fall short in skill, stamina, and accomplishments that Robert was able to achieve. After Robert was told about Rhaegar Targaryen kidnapping his betrothed Lyanna Stark, along with the death of her father and brother, Robert, along with his mentor Jon Arryn and his lifelong friend Eddard Stark, rose in rebellion against the Mad King. Yet the Stormlands were surrounded by loyalists, and with both his allies far to the north, it didn't seem like that Robert would be able to survive. Even some of his own bannermen didn't think victory was possible, and so stayed loyal to the Mad King. Probably their greatest mistake, as in response, Robert rode out with his army and attacked each one individually before they could gather their army into one host and march against him. 3 battles in a single day, all victories for the Stag, and those who were imprisoned soon swore loyalty to him. Yet with enemies on all sides, it was only a matter of time until Robert suffered his first defeat. At the Battle of Ashford, his first loss was given, and it caused him to retreat to the north and hide in the Riverlands, to wait for his allies. The king's men searched for him, but took too long, and eventually Eddard Stark and Hoster Tully fell onto them, and the Battle of the Bells took place. Robert revealed himself as he was hiding in a brothel, still yanking up his trousers, but eager for battle, and he leapt in with his warhammer. It was a massive victory, but the greatest had yet to come, as the rebels would meet the king's son, Rhaegar Targaryen, at the Trident. Robert's host was 30,000 while the enemy was 40,000, but that didn't stop him from charging in. He smashed his way through the enemy until he was face to face with none other than Rhaegar Targaryen, a skilled fighter in his own right. Some even compare him to Arthur Dayne. However, while he did suffer serious injuries from the duel, in the end, he did claim victory as he caved in the prince's chest with his warhammer, killing him. At that moment, the war was over, and it would not be long until Robert would be sitting on the Iron Throne. This was not the last battle he would take part in. The Greyjoy Rebellion would soon rise, challenging him, but that was easily squashed, as Robert had the full might of all 7 kingdoms under his command. Enough of his accomplishments, though. Now we can delve into his weapon of choice and what he will be wearing into battle. Surprising no one, his choice of weapon would clearly be his warhammer, a monstrous thing described as being so heavy that Eddard could scarcely lift it. Now, if you were to take that literally, then it's possible that the warhammer could be anywhere between 60 to 350 pounds. After all, we don't know if he's talking about 1 hand or 2. Both of these weights are ludicrous, and aside from the ice zombies, dragons, animal possession, and shadow babies, it's probably the most fantastical element in the books. However, before I start declaring that Robert Baratheon is superhuman, let's dig into it a bit more. Valyrian Steel, the shop, makes replicas of weapons from the books such as Ice, Long Claw, and Needle. The hammer they made for Robert is 44 inches long and weighs about 10 pounds. Still, double the weight of historical warhammers, but it feels like it's somewhat possible. Here's the thing though, Valyrian Steel tends to make weapons a bit on the smaller side. For example, Longclaw is a bastard sword in the books, so it should be about 4 feet 7 inches. Yet, it's sold at 3 feet 9 inches. Ice, the Valyrian Steel great sword, is just 4 feet 6 inches, when most historical great swords are 5 feet 4 inches. Plus, after reading reviews online, it seems that both the hammer and shaft are hollow, which is perfectly reasonable. After all, people are buying this to display, not to actually use in battle. But I think you all understand where I'm getting at. With Valyrian Steel having a history of shrinking items in their store, as well as the hammer being hollow, then I would estimate that Robert's warhammer in the books weighs as much as 40 pounds. It does not matter if he wields it in 1 hand or 2. He hits you with it, you're not going to survive. He is also, like any proper knight, clad in plate armor with a unique stag helm to keep him safe. It's going to take a lot of effort in order to draw any blood from this warmongering king. Yet, there is something very important that we need to decide for this fight. Does Robert wield his warhammer with 1 or 2 hands? This was surprisingly hard to figure out, as it's not just fan art that depicts him as using it with either 1 hand or 2 hands, but official HBO histories and lore has depicted him using it both with 1 hand and 2 hands. Even the books, I don't think, specifically say if he wielded the hammer in 1 or 2 hands. So, I'm going to have to make a controversial call and say that Robert will be wielding the hammer with both hands. My reasoning is this makes the most sense. To use a warhammer that weighs 40 pounds or more with 1 hand is practically superhuman. Some might say that he used it with 1 hand because he battled Rhaegar on horseback. He would have to use 1 hand on the reins, thus he wields the hammer one-handed. However, there are plenty of accounts of people using two-handed weapons on horseback. Obviously, it's more difficult, but clearly not impossible. And now, with that all squared away, I can finally make my decision on which of these two are the better fighter and who's going to come out on top. And the winner is Robert Baratheon. And that concludes my tutorial on how to make a video get a massive amount of dislikes. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk. Now, hold on. Before you build a pyre and set me aflame, can you please give me the chance to defend myself and lay out my reasoning? Then, if you don't agree, you can try to kill me. Deal? Also, I want to make it clear, I am not willing to die on this hill. The smallest detail I miss could be enough to change my mind, but let me lay it out as best as I can. First, I nerfed Dayne a little bit.
Who killed Hannibal?
In the histories and lore, Valyrian steel is described as being able to cut through iron chainmail and steel plate as if it was all made of cloth. If you believe this, then Arthur wins without breaking a sweat. However, I am more skeptical for a few reasons. For starters, I cannot recall a single instance in the books of Valyrian steel cutting through plate armor. Brienne and Jon are the prime point of view characters we get to see use these mythical blades in action, but they have yet to face against someone in full plate, as Jon has spent most of his time cutting down bronze and fur-covered wildlings, and Brienne is busy with a bunch of rogues and bandits. The show is a different story, as we see both Jon Snow and Brienne cut through enemies as if they aren't wearing any armor. Hell, Brienne even cuts through a man's sword and into his body. However, this is hardly unique to Jon and Brienne, as characters like Sandor Clegane and Tormund also have ignored armor with their swords, that are not made of magic dragon steel. Not to mention, if Valyrian steel was so sharp that it could cut through plate like cloth, then instances where Catelyn and Sandor grab the blades with their bare hands make no sense, as at that point, neither of them should have their fingers at all. Such a description does not work in the book's continuity either. Case in point, if Dayne was pretty much a metal lightsaber, then Eddard and all of his companions at the Tower of Joy would have no chance at all, as any sort of defense they might try would be useless, unless they themselves had Valyrian steel blades, which obviously they did not. With that squared up, we have a very interesting situation: speed versus strength. Robert has the advantage of strength, along with standing at 6.5 feet tall. It's very likely he has the range advantage. On top of that, his weapon is far more suitable for dealing with an enemy in plate. Even if we were to make his hammer much lighter to aim for a level of realism, such as maybe 5 to 10 pounds, I still think Robert comes out on top more often than not. A warhammer is superior against an armored enemy, and Arthur's sword would, by comparison, find it far more difficult to deal any serious damage, whereas a single blow from Robert would mean the sword of the morning's end. Some might say the Dayne's speed would be enough to overtake him, but I question that. Dayne is clearly faster, I won't doubt that, but I hesitate to say the speed would be much greater than Robert's own, as once that warhammer gets its momentum going, his swings would be really fast. The difference of strength and constitution in Robert's favor, I think, will pull far more weight than Arthur's skill and speed. Some might point to Robert's duel against Rhaegar as proof that Dayne would win, as not being as skilled as Dayne nor having a Valyrian steel weapon, Rhaegar was able to seriously injure Robert. However, I would counter that we are not sure if those injuries were from Rhaegar. The Battle of the Trident was exactly that, a battle with around 70,000 men, and in a pitched battle, who knows what happened until the duel took place. But, for the sake of argument, let's pretend that a fresh Robert faced off against a fresh Rhaegar. Are we sure his injuries were that serious? Serious enough to keep him from marching to King's Landing, granted, but not serious enough to leave any long-lasting damage, nor was it serious enough to where he couldn't wait for treatment, as he had his personal maester tend to Barristan Selmy before his own wounds were tended to. So, most likely his injuries were deep cuts, but hardly anything you'd worry about. But who knows? I've been wrong before. Maybe you think Dayne can cut through plate armor like cloth. His speed and skill would trounce Robert's strength and endurance, or maybe even that I am incredibly biased to Robert. Which is fair. I do love big boys with blunt battle hammers named Bobby B. Either way, I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you want more, please like, share, and subscribe. Stay safe, and have a wonderful day.